The nuclear command plane just took off. Not a drill, not a training exercise. The E-6B Mercury, the aircraft the United States Air Force reserves for one specific purpose, commanding nuclear submarines when everything else has gone dark, is airborne over the Persian Gulf right now. Say that out loud. Let it land. Because 12 hours before that plane left the runway, something happened that has not happened since 1945. A United States Navy aircraft carrier was hit in combat. The USS Abraham Lincoln, 100,000 tons of steel, 5,000 American sailors, the physical embodiment of 80 years of American military dominance, struck by Iranian missiles and drones on a Tuesday morning in the Persian Gulf. Two events, one morning. The carrier is burning, the command plane is flying. And Washington has not told you what those two facts mean when they happen simultaneously. I will. Here is what the mainstream media is not telling you. Every network is covering the carrier. Every anchor is showing you the smoke and the damage reports and the Iranian state television footage and the Pentagon press conference where a spokesperson uses the word incident to describe what any naval officer in that room knows is the single most consequential strike on American military hardware since the Second World War. They are showing you the fire. I am going to show you the architecture behind the fire. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to walk you through 4 layers of this story that no one is connecting right now. The military layer, the geopolitical layer, the economic layer, and the layer that the E-6B represents, the nuclear signaling layer that tells you exactly how seriously Washington is reading this moment behind closed doors. By the end of this, you will understand why the plane matters more than the carrier. Stay with me. Let us start with what we know. Not what is being speculated, not what Iran is claiming, and not what the Pentagon is carefully not denying. What is confirmed, documented, and sitting in open source reporting right now. The USS Abraham Lincoln hull classification CVN-72, Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, 104,000 tons, fully loaded. A flight deck the length of 3.5 football fields. 80 aircraft, 5,000 sailors, aviators, and officers. One of 11 nuclear-powered carriers in the United States Navy, the only 11 in the world. The IRGC launched a coordinated strike package. Ballistic missiles combined with drone swarms, not one or the other, both simultaneously. A multi-vector attack designed specifically to find the seams in the carrier strike group's layered air defense architecture. The Aegis combat system, the most sophisticated shipboard air defense ever deployed, engaged the threat. Something got through something. The Abraham Lincoln sustained severe damage. That is the language being used by sources with direct knowledge of the damage assessment. Not superficial, not minor, severe. Now, the E-6B Mercury tail number and flight path confirmed on civilian aviation tracking within 4 hours of the strike reports. The E-6B is a Boeing 707 airframe operated by the United States Navy under the TACAMO mission. Take charge and move out. Its singular operational purpose is to maintain communication with Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines when ground-based command infrastructure is destroyed or compromised. It carries an extremely low-frequency trailing wire antenna 5 miles long that can penetrate ocean depth and reach submarines running silent and deep. The United States does not fly the E-6B on routine patrols over active conflict zones. The last time one appeared publicly over a crisis theater was in the hours following September 11, 2001. It appeared this morning. Here is the timeline as reconstructed from open sources. The carrier is struck in the early morning hours, local time. Iranian state television broadcasts the claim within 90 minutes. Flight Radar 24 data shows the E-6B airborne approximately 4 hours after initial strike reports. Global oil futures spike 6% within the first 6 hours. Defense contractor stocks move before markets formally open. Smart money does not wait for press conferences. And here is what intelligence analysts are now looking at. Whether the sequencing of the Iranian strike timed precisely against an active diplomatic window follows a pattern of deliberate escalation designed not to win militarily, but to paralyze Washington politically. That pattern has a history, and that history is what we need to examine next. Let us go deeper. Because the surface story Iran hit a carrier. America responded with a show of force. That story is incomplete, and incomplete stories are how populations get managed rather than informed. There are four things happening simultaneously beneath the headline, and you need to understand all four to understand what this morning actually means. The first thing, why now? Iran did not hit the Abraham Lincoln because an opportunity presented itself. Regional powers with 2 decades of anti-access doctrine development do not execute carrier strikes on impulse. They execute them on calculation. Here is the calculation. At the precise moment Iranian missiles left their launchers, a diplomatic offer was sitting on a table in an intermediary capital, a deal framework, ceasefire terms, the kind of off-ramp that ends wars and preserves governments. Washington had a decision window, roughly 48 hours to respond to that offer before the military situation on the ground shifted irreversibly. Iran fired the missiles into that window deliberately. Think about what that means. This was not an act of desperation. This was an act of strategic architecture. Iran offered Washington a way out with one hand and struck its most symbolically powerful asset with the other simultaneously, not sequentially. The offer and the strike were a single operation with a single objective: produce paralysis inside the American decision-making system, force Washington to manage domestic political fallout, congressional demands for accountability, public shock, media frenzy, and a binary military decision all at the same time. While the clock runs down, intelligence analysts are looking at whether this mirrors the operational logic Iran used in September of 2019 when the Aramco facility strike in Saudi Arabia was executed at a moment of maximum diplomatic sensitivity, producing exactly the kind of political paralysis that prevented a coherent American military response. If this pattern holds, Iran has refined that playbook into something significantly more dangerous. The second thing, what the E-6B is actually telling us, the Pentagon will not say this, so I will. The E-6B deployment is a message, a deliberate, calculated, publicly visible message. And here's how we know it is deliberate. The E-6B appeared on civilian aviation tracking, Flight Radar 24, publicly accessible to anyone with an internet connection, including every intelligence service in Tehran, Beijing, and Moscow. The United States military has the operational capacity to conduct E-6B missions without appearing on civilian radar. They chose not to exercise that capacity this morning. Washington wanted Tehran to see the plane. Washington wanted Beijing to see the plane. Washington wanted every capital that is currently recalculating its threat assessment in light of what Iran did to the Abraham Lincoln to see that plane in the air and understand precisely what its presence communicates. The message is this: you have struck our carrier. We have activated nuclear command relay infrastructure. We are not escalating to nuclear posture. We are demonstrating that we have considered that we have the architecture operational and that the ladder you are climbing has rungs you have not yet seen. If this pattern holds, the E-6B is the most sophisticated piece of diplomatic communication deployed this morning. Not a weapon. A signal sent in a language that requires no translation in any capital that matters. The third thing, the doctrine that died this morning. For 30 years, the carrier has functioned as the foundation of American deterrence, not because of what it does, but because of what adversaries believed it could survive. The myth was invulnerability. The operational theory was layered defense. The threat is engaged at maximum range by the carrier air wing. What penetrates the air wing is engaged by long-range surface-to-air missiles from the strike group escorts. What penetrates the missiles is engaged by close-in weapon systems. What penetrates the close-in weapon systems was, in theory, never supposed to penetrate the close-in weapon systems. Iran found the seams between the layers. Ballistic missiles forced the Aegis system into high-altitude, high-speed engagement mode. While standard missile interceptors were processing ballistic threats, drone swarms came in low, slow, and with minimal radar cross-section. While electronic warfare systems managed drone signatures, the next missile salvo was already airborne. The engagement windows created by intercepting the first wave became the vulnerabilities exploited by the second wave. This is the coordinated saturation attack that has lived in classified threat assessments at the Pentagon for 3 decades as the theoretical scenario that could defeat carrier-based defense. Theoretical until this morning. Every carrier strike group commander in the United States Navy is reading the damage assessment right now and revising their private survivability calculation. The Navy will not say this publicly. It will say the Aegis system performed as designed. It will say the crew responded with exceptional professionalism. All of that may be true. None of it addresses the myth, and the myth was the deterrence. The fourth thing, what China just received for free. Beijing has spent 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars building what military planners call anti-access area denial architecture. The DF-21D ballistic missile, designated by NATO analysts as the carrier killer, has never been fired at a carrier in live combat. The DF-26, with extended range reaching American bases in Guam, has never been tested against a real Aegis combat system under actual wartime engagement conditions. This morning, Iran tested a functionally equivalent multi-vector attack architecture against a real American carrier in a real combat environment, and it worked. China did not need to spend a single UAN or risk a single diplomatic relationship to acquire that data. Iran provided it live in real time in a combat environment that no simulation, no war game, no classified exercise can replicate with equivalent fidelity. Taiwan is watching the Abraham Lincoln's damage reports right now and asking a question that has no comfortable answer. If a regional power with Iranian resources and Iranian missile inventory can severely damage an American carrier, what does that mean for the credibility of American extended deterrence in the Taiwan Strait against an adversary with Chinese resources and Chinese missile inventory? That question does not have a reassuring answer this morning, and every defense ministry in the Pacific knows it. The doctrine is broken, the myth is broken, and the recalculation is not happening over weeks and months. It is happening right now in real time, in the same hours that 5,000 American sailors are fighting fires on a flight deck in the Persian Gulf. Which brings us to what this means for you. You are not a naval officer. You are not a defense minister. You are not a carrier strike group commander revising your threat assessment at 0:30. But what happened to the Abraham Lincoln? This morning is going to reach into your life with a precision that no missile achieved against that flight deck. And it is going to do it through 3 channels that the geopolitical commentary will not connect for you. So let me connect them. The first channel, oil. 21% of the world's seaborne oil transits the Strait of Hormuz every single day, not occasionally every day, approximately 17 million barrels. The moment that strait becomes a contested military theater rather than a tense but functional shipping lane, that number does not gradually decline. It stops. And the global economy has approximately 72 hours of buffer before the stoppage becomes a price event that reaches every gas station, every shipping container, every grocery store supply chain on the planet. Oil futures moved 6% within 6 hours of the strike reports, 6% in 6 hours on a commodity that prices everything from the plastic in your phone case to the fuel in the aircraft, that moves the components that build the products that stock the shelves you shop from. That was before full damage assessment. That was before Washington made a decision. If the administration chooses escalation and Iran responds by mining Hormuz or deploying fast attack boats against tanker traffic, analysts are looking at price movements that make the 2022 energy crisis look like a correction rather than a crisis. Smart money already moved this morning. The question is whether you are watching the second channel. The markets read the E6B. Defense contractor stocks moved before formal market open. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, the companies that manufacture the interceptor missiles, the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group was firing, the drone countermeasure systems, the replacement ordnance that a carrier strike group requires after a sustained combat engagement. Those stocks moved on the E6B signal before any official statement confirmed the severity of the damage. Simultaneously, sovereign wealth fund withdrawal discussions that were already circulating before this morning's strike accelerated. Gulf state funds that had been quietly diversifying away from dollar-denominated assets since Victoria Base was obliterated now have a carrier strike photograph to show their investment committees as justification for what was already a directional shift. The carrier hit is not a foreign policy story for financial markets. It is a risk recalibration event, and risk recalibration events do not wait for diplomatic resolution before repricing assets. The third channel, your allies are doing the math. This is the channel that will determine the shape of the next decade more completely than oil prices or defense stocks. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia. Every American ally in the Pacific whose security architecture rests on the credible deterrence of American carrier power in contested waters woke up this morning to a data point that their defense ministries have been quietly modeling as a worst-case scenario for 20 years. The worst-case scenario happened in the Persian Gulf against Iranian missiles, not Chinese hypersonics, not Russian calls, Iranian missiles and drones. If Iranian military technology and Iranian resources can severely damage an American carrier, the Allied defense ministries in Tokyo and Seoul and Taipei are running the same calculation with Chinese variables substituted for Iranian ones. And the output of that calculation is producing conversations in those capitals right now that Washington is not controlling, not leading, and not fully aware of. When allies begin recalculating the credibility of American guarantees, they do not announce it. They begin quietly building independent deterrence capacity. They begin hedging their diplomatic positioning. They begin conversations with counterparts they previously would not have engaged. That process, once started, does not reverse easily. The Abraham Lincoln was hit in the Persian Gulf. But the aftershock is traveling toward the Pacific, toward the alliances that American global power depends on, toward the relationships that no carrier can be rebuilt to restore once the credibility calculation shifts. That is what this morning cost. And the invoice has not finished arriving. Here is where we are. The carrier is damaged. The command plane landed. The deal is still on the table. The decision window is closing. And Washington is standing at the most consequential fork in the road since the Cuban Missile Crisis, with a domestic political explosion detonating in real time and no clean options in either direction. Take the deal. Iran declares victory to its population. China files the live combat data on carrier vulnerability into its Taiwan operational planning. Every allied defense ministry in the Pacific begins the quiet, irreversible process of hedging against American guarantees that just became measurably less credible. The myth stays broken, and the next adversary who considers testing American resolve does so with this morning's footage as a reference point. Reject the deal. The military window that is currently open begins to close the moment Iran's tunnel networks stop burning and its missile reload cycle completes. The 82nd Airborne advances. The B-52s continue, and the world discovers whether American resolve, when tested at the level of a carrier strike, produces overwhelming escalation or managed restraint. Both outcomes reshape the world. Both are on the table right now simultaneously. The E-6B landed. But the question it was sent to answer, that question is still open. And here is what I need you to understand. The next 72 hours are going to produce decisions that will define the architecture of global power for the next generation. Not years, a generation. I will be covering every development as it breaks. The diplomatic signals, the market movements, the military positioning, the things that get said quietly between the headlines. If you are not subscribed, subscribe now. This story is not over. It has not even reached its most consequential moment yet.